Good morning. My name is Joe Barnett. I'm a retired athletic director from Irving ISD. I'd like to welcome you to the Retired Athletic Directors Roundtable this morning. A couple of things. We'd like you to sign in if you're watching this morning. At the bottom of the screen, there's a place where you can sign in to show us who is viewing. Also, there's a chat room. You can click on that. If we have time, we'll have you ask some additional questions. But I'd like to welcome you to today's roundtable discussion. We're here to have some of the most successful, influential, and knowledgeable athletic directors in the history of our state with us today. Men and women retired with knowledge and experience and have graciously agreed to join us today to share their thoughts on some topics that were submitted by many of you throughout the state. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our panel. First of all, and I'll let them tell a little bit about what they're doing now. First of all, Jim Slaughter, who retired from San Angelo ISD.
Playing lots of golf, enjoying life, meeting a lot of retired coaches all over the state to play golf. I'm the one that they get the money from.
Okay. All right. And we have Gil Garza, who retired from Dallas ISD. Gil, what are you doing now?
Well, I'm doing a little bit of what Jim's doing, playing a lot of golf, spending time with the grandkids. I've been retired 2.5 years, and it's wonderful. I'm really enjoying myself. Just trying to stay as busy as I can, and under all these conditions, it's not the same, but it'll get better eventually, and get back to doing what we like to do.
Absolutely. Bob Dubey, who retired from Richardson ISD.
Thank you, Joe. Yes, I'm busy. I'm working part-time, selling scoreboards up in the Dallas area. And I'm also on the city council for the city of Richardson, so trying to make a difference there. So I'm still very active and still busy and trying to give back to a community that I love.
Okay, great. Johanna Denson, who retired from Pflugerville ISD.
Yes, good morning to everyone. I have a athletic consulting business, so I have an opportunity to help athletic directors, and also director of TAC for the Texas High School Athletic Directors Association. And then what I do for fun, I travel, and I just bought a new bicycle yesterday. I can't wait to get on it.
Okay. Marmion Dambrino, who retired from Houston ISD.
I am gainfully employed with TRS ISD and enjoy every bit of TRS. It's really been, it's been a definite change, a whole heck of a lot less stress. And I'm just living my best life, just enjoying every day and connecting with old friends, visiting family. Just having a great time and doing whatever in the world I want to do.
Right. All right. And Jerry Comalander. Jerry retired from Northeast ISD.
Just having a good time, Joe. It's really been a good 5 years since I retired, and we do a lot of travel, or I say we were doing a lot of traveling before the number 19 jumped on everybody, and so now we're trying to avoid that virus. But we got 2 sons that live here in San Antonio, and we have a big time with them and our grandkids. And I still work a little bit for UIL with Region 4 and spring of the year, and enjoy that and play a little golf. And Jim, we got to get together.
I hear you.
I'll let you get some of my money.
Well, I can't believe that would happen.
We're having a good time. My wife and I really enjoy each other, and so we're doing things that we never had time to do before. A lot of fun.
Okay, thank you. And then our moderator this morning, who retired from Fort Bend ISD, and I'm going to turn it over to Keith Kilgore.
Joe, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Appreciate everybody joining us this morning. I retired twice. Once in 2012, another time in 2017. I went back, and I hate retirement. I wish I was there every day. I miss those friends. I miss being over cheerleading. It's just it's one of those things that just, I wake up every day just miserable, but I'm addressing my misery by spending some time at our lake house up in the hill country, and also, working with Rusty here at THSADA, and everything I can do to get by each day with the withdrawals I'm still having from that great time I had as working as athletic director. But seriously, we're privileged to be able to have this opportunity today to be able to put this together. A lot of great folks here and some good comments, and we appreciate the questions and the topics that were sent to us. It was difficult to pick from all the great ones we had, but we've got a number of questions here that we're going to address, and we're going to have 2 or 3 of our panelists talk on each one of these things as we move through. And we're going to start off with this question: what were the most important characteristics you look for when hiring coaches? And Coach Comalander, we're going to ask you to kick us off with that question.
Keith, I worked in 3 different school districts in 54 years, and they were great places. And I realize school districts are different, and maybe what you look for is a little bit different. But I think there are some non-negotiables when you're looking for coaches, and some of those, and I'm gonna throw them out there, and maybe somebody else will pitch in. But I always tried to ask questions that weren't direct to the issue. Get people to talk, and through their talking, then you determine the answer to what you're looking for. And the first one is, are they trustworthy? You've got to have people that are trustworthy in this business, and they've got to trust you, but you've got to trust them with mom and dad's most precious commodity, and that's their kids. And so I always wanted to know, is that lady or is that man going to be trustworthy with a bunch of kids? Secondly, are they going to be loyal? The grapevine in education, and particularly in coaching, runs pretty fast. And when the team is 2 and 8 or 4 and 30, you better have some loyal people on the coaching staff. They better be loyal to your school district, and they better be loyal to your head coach. Not blind loyalty that allows a person to break the law, but loyalty that protects the integrity of our profession. I always wanted people that were passionate. I used to tell our staff, if they don't have any fire in their belly, we don't want them coaching here. And so we wanted people that were passionate. They love to coach, they love their profession, and they love kids. That's vital to a characteristic that good coaches have. And work ethic. You've got to have a work ethic. It's not an 8-to-5 job. They're going to find that out pretty quick, and so I always laid that out ahead of time in the interview. What do you expect in the way of free time? So the work ethic was very important to me, and then of course you've got to find out something about their knowledge, what they know about what they're going to do, and I always tried to hire coaches, especially young coaches, that were they didn't necessarily have all the answers right now, but what could they be in 3 years? If we can keep them here and we can influence them in the right way, what are they going to be in 3 years, and how are they going to impact our programs? And then lastly, one of my big things was, can they coach them up? Coaching involves a lot of critiquing. And sometimes that critiquing can be pretty hard-nosed. But in the final analysis, can they coach those kids up? Get them to do better than they ever thought they could do. And I always felt like if I can identify coaches with those characteristics, we got a chance to be successful.
All right. Hey, Jim, you got anything you want to add to that?
Well, Jerry did a great job of hitting on the things that I believe in, and trust is probably number one. You got to have that trust, and they're going to come in there and they're going to have an opportunity to do positive things for your program. But if they're not trustworthy, they're going to have ability to do negative things for your program. And as I progressed in my coaching and got to know people and was around people and everything, I reached the point where I also started looking for maybe a coach that I could bring in that I did trust, but had some skills on different things that we could do on offense or defense that would add to the program, that made us look a little bit different and a little bit tougher than we were in the previous months. And so Jerry hit it well. He hit all the things that I truly believe in, and that trust thing is one of the most important things.
You know, I always told our staff, I was not the athletic director for 27 years because of my pretty face. It was because I felt like I built a level of trust with our coaches, but also with campus administration and with central office administration. And Jim is exactly right. If you can't build that trust in your program, you're not going to get there.
All right. Anybody else want to add anything to that before we move to the next question? Okay, here we are. Number 2. This is a great one. If you were still working today, what would your highest priorities be? Marmion, what do you think?
Well, obviously, and everyone's aware of this, is dealing with the safety of our kids and coaches with this COVID-19 epidemic. That's first and foremost. But also first and foremost is we need to discuss or have discussions regarding the elephant in the room, which are the protests that are going on and racial relations. And athletics is a perfect platform for us to have these kinds of conversations and be open about them. But again, coaches need to listen to kids and allow kids to talk about this. And they may need some training in being able to deal with this. But this is a societal issue. But athletics, again, to me, is the best platform, because all of our kids know that they have to work together for the common cause of the sport that they are in order to, win, lose, draw, whatever the case may be. But they know they have to work together as a team. But listening to them, because sports is going to bring all of them together. I think that the organizations and the diversifying organizations, the THSCA, TGCA, THSADA, any organizations, and diversifying them so that we can, have some type of balance, that your coaching staffs are reflective of the demographics of your district or that particular school, or your athletic departments and your assistant athletic directors reflect that of the demographics of your school. So getting back to the highest priority, number 1 is going to be safety. And we all know that, and we work on that daily. But this COVID-19 has kind of gotten everybody by their toenails, and starting back to school will be a challenge, and there's no doubt. And I know that the sitting ADs now are going to have to be creative, innovative, and really pull something out of the box that folks haven't ever seen before in order for the kids to be able to have an opportunity to participate. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. And before we move on to Bob's going to add on this as well, but Marmion made me think something I wanted to just add in here. Looking at what we're dealing with in terms of the race relations, or just being able to see kids as kids. Obviously, Marmion and I both, and Rusty, everybody in the AD Association, lost a dear friend recently with the passing of Joe Tusa. And, he was a mentor of mine and Marmion's as well. And those are the things he talked about way back when. All right. Hey, Bob.
Thank you. Marmion, great job. And I agree with everything she just said. But one thing I would add is your coaches need to know that you are there to support them. And you've got to give them the ability and confidence that you're going to be there with them through the thick and the thin of whatever's happening. And times like this, it's tough. So you've got, as the athletic director, you've got to be the one that goes to bat for them. And when you are speaking, all athletic directors are in a public eye, so to speak, and you're the one that people call on and you're being the one to ask. But you always praise your coaches. You always give them the credit first, and then you work through those things and you give them the tools to where they can be successful. The safety is the key, whether it's equipment or it's the rooms or it's the whatever you got to do to make sure that your kids are safe and your coaches have the opportunity. I think Marmion nailed it right on, and your coaches will be loyal to you. And Jerry commented about loyalty, but they're going to be loyal to you when you put them first and you support them. And then they know if they cross that line because you've already set those expectations, and they know what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. So a program with integrity, a program with a culture that starts in your office as the athletic director. You're going to set the pace and set the tempo, and you're going to lead by example. So that's what I would say, and it's very important that you do that and you stay consistent with your message to all of your coaches. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else want to add anything to that before we move on?
Just one thing, Keith, I'd just like to add something that Marmion said about training. I think we have, most of us have great relationships with our coaches, but many times our coaches, they don't have the training to have those conversations. And I think it's really important as a school district to find someone that can provide that training so that you say the right things and are sensitive to all groups of people that are involved in athletics.
That's a very good point. Okay. All right. Well, Johanna, while you're up, you're going to lead off with the next question here. What approach did you take in dealing with difficult parents?
Well, I kind of changed that a little bit, Keith. I put difficult conversations because it's not just with the parents. Sometimes it's with administration. Sometimes it's with the coaches. So difficult conversations are just part of the job. I mean, that's just something when you go into the role of an athletic director, you're going to have those conversations. And the most of the time, disagreements are because of miscommunication or lack of communication. So it's really important that you communicate. What are your expectations of the program? What are your expectations of the district athletic department or the district in itself? And when you communicate those things to parents, it diffuses a lot of the misconceptions and a lot of the concerns that parents may have. If you are going to have those conversations with a parent, for example, contact them immediately. Don't wait a day or two later. And prior to contacting the parent, contact the personnel that are involved if they are alleging that there's an issue with or a situation that there's an issue with, so that you have all of the facts in place when you have the conversation. Also, if the parent becomes belligerent, you don't have to listen to that. I know sometimes we listen to it. There's a time in the conversation that you have the right as a human being to say, I'm not going to listen to anymore. We're going to end this conversation. And when you get better control, however you want to term that, when you get better control of yourself, we can continue the conversation. But it's really important that you communicate through your school district, you communicate through your social media, so people understand what the expectations are for the programs and the athletic department. And that will squelch a lot of difficult conversations. And they're not going to stop. You're still going to have difficult conversations, and they don't get easier. You just get better at handling them.
Okay. Gil, hey, take that baton and run with it.
Okay, thanks, Keith. I want to start by touching on what Johanna said at the very end. You know, when you're dealing with parents, you do have to remember that you represent your school district. And I'm kind of on the other end of this. I never was intimidated by parents who were upset about anything, and they wanted to talk about certain situations that come up with some member of your coaching staff. I know sometimes coaches, they get intimidated. They don't want to bother with parents, but we have to remember that we're coaching their prized possessions. These are their sons and daughters, and they have every right to question and to inquire about what's going on in their son or daughter's life and their experience in your athletic program. But I think the important thing is to listen. Just listen to them and let them get what they have to say off their chest. you know, sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're, you know, we're not right. Our coaches made a mistake. They weren't treated fairly. But I always like to put myself in their shoes as a parent. I mean, I have 3 children, and you know, they're very valuable to me and precious. And you know, I want them to be treated fairly. Now, the parents have no right to tell you who to play and when to play and what position to play. Those are things that are non-negotiable. But to listen and to give them the respect and let them get things off their chest. And lots of times when they leave your office, they feel like, they feel really good because they got everything off their chest. And they might even say, man, I told him off. Well, that's okay. That's okay too. You know, I mean, but you got to treat people fairly with respect. And remember that you do represent the school district. And unfortunately, sometimes they are right.
May I just add one thing, Keith? May I add one thing that Gil said? I've learned something from Gil. We had a situation, and I was sharing it with Gil, and Gil said it's a very similar situation that he was talking about. He listened to and then pretty much said to me, is that the hill you want to die on? Sometimes it takes each other to get ourselves back in perspective. So listening, and I think that, and I have it capitalized on my notes here, so I really appreciate him bringing that out. Parents just want to be heard. And when we have an opportunity to have dialogue with each other, like I said, I learned from Gil in a situation that I was dug in, and when he made that comment, I thought, yeah, I got to listen to Gil. He's right on this one. Thank you, Gil.
Yeah.
One of the things that I used to try to do when I was dealing with parents. Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, I was just going to add a point. I always had a rule that if a parent comes in, we'll talk about your child, and we'll talk about the coaching or lack of coaching that you think has been taking place, and you think your child's an All-American, and the coach thinks differently. And but we are not going to talk about anybody else's child in the course of that conversation. And you know, sooner or later that phone's going to ring, because as Gil said, there's going to be a disagreement between the parent and the coach, and sooner or later your phone's going to ring, and you've got to support your coaches, as someone's already said, but you don't let them get into that comparison stage, because they will. And as soon as they brought up little Johnny, that's when I stopped the conversation immediately and said, hey, we're here to talk about your child, and I'm here to listen, but we're not going to talk about somebody else's child.
Something I'd like to add. I think it's really important that you don't read into the kid what you're seeing in the parents. Sometimes the kid is a great kid and will do anything for you. And because of the way the parents are and the corners that they back you into, you want to take out on the kids, and you can't do it. You got to be careful about reading into the kids what you see in the parents.
Keith, let me add on to that what Jim just said. You know, we have to remember that we're athletic directors, and big part of our job is to teach and grow our coaches. And I think these conversations that we're having right now amongst ourselves need to be had with the coaches that we serve. Because a lot of coaches do get intimidated because they don't want to deal with parents. But I think part of being a good coach is to learn how to communicate. And I go back to what I said at the beginning. I think communication starts with listening, putting yourself in their shoes. Just let them talk, let them get it off their chest. And a lot of what Coach Comalander and Johanna just said were right on, you know. But at the same time, I think it's very, very important for us to help grow our coaches and teach them how to do things properly.
One of the things that I used to do in dealing with parents, that I'd make a statement up front and tell them that I thank them for being there. I thank them for taking up for their kid, because there were a lot of parents out there that didn't even know what their kids were doing or care what their kids were doing, and they wouldn't do it. And that they may not necessarily walk out of there pleased with what we were going to say or do, but I wanted them to know that I genuinely appreciated the fact that they would take the time to come in and talk about that. And that seemed to put us on the same level, and it seemed to kind of ease the way. But I think going back to what Gil said, I'd also tried to think, you know, if this was my kid, you know, how would I have reacted to this? And I think that made it a whole lot easier to do that. So, hey, a lot of great points there, guys. Appreciate it a whole lot. Moving on to question number 4. How did you build relationships with your administration at the district level and at the campus level? And Bob, we'll let you start off on this one.
Thank you, Keith. Building relationships with your central staff is critical because they really don't know what you're doing, most of them. I mean, some of them do, but I would tell you that never turn down an opportunity to meet with the superintendent or your personnel people or even your school board, whoever you give an opportunity to meet with. Sometimes coaches and athletic directors, we get in a scenario where we are out of time, out of effort, out of energy, and we don't want to have one more meeting or one more meeting. But it's those meetings where you are able to build those relationships. Other thing that I would say is you need the people in HR. You need the people that you supervise you. When you go to them with issues, problems, always have solutions. Most of them don't understand athletics well enough to be able to say, we're going to do this for you or help you in this way. So go in there with options A, option B, option C to help solve the problem for them. And then it takes the load off their desk, so to speak, and they're willing to go to bat for you. And building those relationships, for example, say in purchasing, you rely on those people tremendously. Be sure and take them to lunch from time to time. Send them a box of cookies. I know Leslie Slovak was big on helping us with that. And we'd send cookies and stuff or take care of the people over in our purchasing department. You know, those people you rely on, but you never miss an opportunity to celebrate Secretary's Day or Administration Day, and make sure those people believe that you think they're special and that you need them and that they have a place. And a new cap every year or a new shirt or any of those things go a long way. Make them feel like they're part of your team, because that's what you talk about. That's what you build, is a team concept. And you want them to be one of the front ones up there that supports that team. So that's the way I would address it.
All right, Gil?
Well, I agree everything that what Bob just said. I mean, he made some great points. But I'm going to give you an example of what we try to do, and I try to do in places I worked at. You know, I'm sitting here on a dinner table that seats 6 people, and it's kind of a big table. You know, right now that's where I am in my dining room here, in my condo here at the island. And I was at an in-service one time when the superintendent passed out an empty salt shaker. And he gave every one of us a salt shaker. And, you know, we looked at it and said, what's this? What's the significance of this? And he went on to say that, when you are at a dining room table and you sit down in a restaurant, where's the salt shaker? And it's always in the middle of the table. It's not on a corner, or it shouldn't be. It should be in the middle of the table. And he said, that's where I want you to have your department part of our school district. Pretend that this table is your school district, and this salt shaker is the athletic department. Where do you want it? You want it in a corner? No, you want it in the center, and you want to make that a focal point, because as we all know, athletics can bring schools, school districts, community together. But like as Bob mentioned, we are just part of a team. And too many times we think that we're all of that, and we're not. We're just one part of a team, and we need to, building relationships with administrators is critical to anything you do. As I got a little older, I realized that I needed them more than they needed me. And a lot of, you know, I went through a lot of trainings, you know, and learned a lot of things. Going through those trainings, which I didn't want to go to, but I did go to them because I knew I needed them. I'd rather be out playing golf with Jim Slaughter and Jerry Comalander, but you know, I went to, and one of the phrases that I've used so many times visiting with administrators, people in charge of other departments, is this is the term I used a lot, was, hey, John, I need your help. And when you said that and they heard that, all of a sudden, it puts them on a, wow, I want to help this guy out. And that's how I started the conversation. And it worked for me many, many times, but it is critical have meetings with your bosses. It's critical also for our coaches to understand how important a principal is to their success, especially a head coach of any sport. You've got to have a relationship with that principal, because that principal will help you in many ways and hurt you in many ways. So without that relationship, I guess, putting it all and wrapping it up in a little phrase, building relationships is critical to your success as an athletic director with administrators, both at the campus level and at central office. If you don't do that, you're going to be in for a long career.
You know,
Keith, can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, be careful. If you can't solve the problems and you got to take your problems to them all the time, pretty soon they start thinking, hey, I need somebody that can solve these problems, and this guy can't do it for me. So you got to be careful.
It's true.
Just to add a point, I really like what Bob said about having plan A, plan B, and maybe even plan C. I very seldom went to a meeting where we did not have an agenda. We always had an agenda. And in most cases, that agenda came to me in advance. And it's critically important for the athletic director to go into those meetings as prepared as they can. And I always looked at it as know what my bottom line is. Plan A may be the Rolls Royce. Plan B may be a high-end Chevrolet. And plan C may not be quite so good. But you have to know what your bottom line is and be prepared to defend it. But you need those people like Gil said, and you also need what Jim said. If you can't solve the problems, they're going to look for somebody to replace you.
Jerry, that was well said. Yeah, thank you, Keith. That was well said, and I agree. And one I guess go a little step further is there are so many people that you go into the office to see them, they instantly say no. No, we're not going to do that. Or no. I always believed it was important to say yes. And it may not be that you are saying yes to exactly what they're asking for, but you're there to solve a problem. You're there to have a solution. And yes, I am here to help you. We may do it a different way. And by the time you finish those meetings, they feel like they're winners, even though you know deep down you're the one that won because you didn't give everything to them that they were maybe asking for. I'll give you a scenario. I had a maintenance man that was really anti-athletics. He was pretty negative, but his job was to make sure the fields were ready and everything. And he came to me and he'd want this, want that, or he would be wanting to tell me no. And one of the last meetings I had with him, he got up and he looked at me and he said, how come every time I come in here, I leave thinking that you just won the jackpot? And I said, well, it's because we're here for kids. And you know deep down, this is what's best for the kids and what's best for the programs. And we're all here to do that. So anyway, that's one thing I would say to you. Find a way to make it work.
All right. Great comments from everybody. Anybody else have anything they want to add to that? All right, next question. How did you handle the training of coaches regarding legal and safety issues? We're going to start with Gil on that and go to Johanna. And Marmion, since you brought that up earlier, probably was going to slide back to you to add some things on that as well. All right, Gil?
Well, one of the things that we did is we believed very much in professional development. We had monthly coordinators meetings, and we never missed. As Coach Comalander said, we had an agenda. We gave it to our coaches ahead of time. They knew what was going to be discussed. They in turn had to go back and meet with their coaches in a staff meeting within a week of our coordinators meeting. And professional development was critical. We had sign-in sheets. We had agendas. We wanted to make sure that the things that we covered were on paper, so that no one could come back and say that no one ever discussed this with me. And we also believed a lot and did a lot with the NIAAA, a lot. And they have classes that cover the 14 legal duties and talked about that. And we constantly brought that up at coordinators meetings because it is important, you know, and I always said, you don't have to have the newest equipment, but it better be clean and it better be safe and we can use it. And if you can't, let's get rid of it. Let's repair it and let's buy something that works for us. But professional development, constantly staying on top of that, reminding, teaching about what your duties, legal duties are, and safety was big on our list. Huge.
I agree with Gil. We also had a real push for professional development in the school districts where I worked. Safety, hands down, has to take priority. Knowing the legal issues, all that's wrapped into the safety issues. We met weekly. I didn't have as many schools as Gil, or some of you others have, but we met weekly. Middle school coordinators met one day, high school coordinators met another day. And I know as they continued in their seasons, sometimes they would get a little bit laxed. So prior to each season, we'd have conversations with the groups that were going into season, reminding them, this is what we need to have completed. Let's check your equipment. Here's your checklist. And so there were a lot of forms, I say forms, checklists that they would complete. And most of that was not really for me. It was for their own benefit because they would find things that, oh, I didn't realize that wasn't functional. And they're getting ready to play volleyball or football, whatever the case may be. Also, after their season is concluding, we go back in and have a conversation about, have you taken care of these items? Their UIL reports, if they're going into district playoffs. So we wouldn't be caught here on the backside not taking care of some information we need in order to progress to the playoffs. And then we had little weekly newsletters. It wasn't a very extensive newsletter, but just a little news flash that said, all right, let's make sure we get these things in. Have you checked your outdoor equipment? Have you checked the lights in the gym? Just reminders, because in the heat of the battle, and they're in season, or if they're preparing for their season, they really, many times, that is not on their mind. They're getting kids ready to play. They're dealing with parent issues, and the list goes on. Just a little news blast that would just help them refocus and keep their mind on what's important. Make sure your equipment is safe. Make sure you've taken care of your paperwork. But just reminders. Professional development will save you a lot of problems. At the end of the day, just to remind everybody that the accountability piece will always come back to the athletic director. If a child is injured or if some paperwork is not turned in on time, it comes back to you as the teacher, the athletic director, to make sure that they understand these are the things that needed to be completed.
I know a lot of the current athletic directors do have the athletic coordinators meetings and the sign-in sheets, and that's an outstanding practice, is what Gil was saying, and Johanna too. But as an athletic director, those of you who are out there now, it's really, really important that these agendas that you have, you speak directly to those agendas, and whether it's risk management or any safety issues, just like Gil, HISD, we had the NIAAA courses that we taught to our coaches, and Andre Walker has continued that. We had our legal counsel from the district come in and speak at our coaches meetings at the beginning of each season. They would come into the athletic coordinators meetings and talk about relevant cases in athletics that had taken place in Texas, so that it kind of resonated with them that this did indeed happen. This can happen. This could happen. And Lord, don't let it be me. So I do believe that as many times as you can engage coaches in professional development pertaining to legal issues and safety concerns, it's going to benefit your programs. It's going to help your coaches, and it's going to get a lot of stuff away from you as long as they know how to handle things. And as an athletic director, you teach them how to handle things. So that's my retired 2 cents.
Very good.
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there.
All right. Well, you invest those 2 cents, and the interest will pay a lot. But it's an ever-changing landscape. It's a lot different than what it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. But in this day and time, especially from the legal standpoint, we need to do things right always, but we need to document what we're doing and be sure that we can show that, that we've done what was required of us, and that, that we've stood in line not only with the legal aspects of whatever our geographic location might be, but also the school district. So great point.
Keith, may I just say something about the agenda? I know several people have mentioned the agendas. I personally had to pull some agendas before, and basically it was a safety issue, and go back through and be able to point out this information was shared, and yes, it was on this date. So those agendas are lifesavers, just to know. Don't go in there and write it on a piece of paper. Make sure it is a document that you can retrieve in the event that you might have to retrieve that document.
Right. Sign-in sheets also proved to be very important at times as well. To
absolutely
prove somebody was there, right? Okay, hey, Jimmy, talk to us about the structure you use for evaluating coaches.
It's strange how it works when it comes to evaluating coaches. I'm a firm believer that you got to constantly be talking and visiting with your coaches. And if you see something that's going on, you can't wait for 2 weeks and all of a sudden drop the bomb on them saying, hey, you shouldn't have done this, or you should have done this different, or something like that. Constant evaluation takes place. I wasn't always big on the fact that you had evaluations that were scheduled and you filled out a sheet of paper and you went through it and sat down with them. And more than anything, if I had a bad coach, I'd already been visiting about a lot of those problems that person was having. And sometimes probably the evaluation, what sold me on it was my good coaches, because a lot of times they were doing such a good job that they weren't hearing me brag on them or say good things about them and stuff like that. And by doing the evaluation, I had an opportunity to say, hey, I appreciate you. You do a great job. Here's all the positive things I think you're doing with your program. So I'm a true believer that you don't all of a sudden, after 2 weeks, jump somebody and say, hey, here's what you should have been. It's constant things, and try to do it in such a way that you don't embarrass them in front of other coaches. Try to do it in such a way that you don't rile them to the point where they're mad at you and wanting to attack you and leave the room talking about you. Try to work it out, but it's a thing that is constantly taking place, not something that all of a sudden jumps up and you try to deal with it.
Okay, Jerry?
I think everybody probably has an evaluation form of some kind, and how you use it is maybe different. I had one that had what I call the 7 golden rules of coaching. But one of those items was teaching and coaching. And I learned this early when I was a coach, young coach, and it was the 5 fundamentals of coaching. And I used to tell our staff this every year as a coach, and I told our athletic department staff the same thing. There are 5 rules that you need to know, and if a guy can do these 5 things, they can coach anything. And the first one is, can they teach a kid how to get in the proper stance? And there's a proper stance for anything that you're going to do. And secondly, can you teach the kid how to line up? All that sounds simple, but one time we were playing a football game and we were ahead slightly, and our defensive coordinator had told them to back up, and I looked out there on the field and our front 4 had backed up 4 yards. And that was not a good thing. So there was a lack of communication. So alignment is critical. Thirdly, they have to know what their responsibility is. Fourth, they have to know what they're looking at. And lastly, they have to be taught a technique to execute those things that I just talked about. And I always believed if a coach can do those 5 things, they can coach. If they can't, it's going to be tough. And so I tried to emphasize with our staff in Northeast School District, when you go out to observe a practice, look for those things. Teach a kid how to line up. Teach them how to get in a stance, and so on. I always thought that was very, very important in coaching. And when we went to many practices and observed practice, and that's what I always looked for. Then when it comes to evaluation, you got to hopefully have that coach leave there feeling like you really appreciate him, you're his supporter. And if it's the other way around, then you just got to talk turkey and get with the program.
Johanna, before we move to you, I want to make this quick comment. Somewhere along the way, I determined that I wanted to make an evaluation tool that didn't have any numbers on it, where I could just actually put down in words what I felt and what needed to be ruled. Because when you're using numbers, and I'll just use this example, you can have a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 was superior, 4 was excellent, 3 was good, 2 needs improvement, 1 poor. If you gave somebody a 3, they didn't look down there to see what that 3 represented, or a 4 meaning it was excellent. They just felt like they got graded down. And then after that, when you're going through the tool, you lose your whole realm of communication. So I just got to a point one time I threw it all out the window, and I created my own tool, got it approved, where everything that I put down was in writing. It was words. It was my opinion, and we did away with numbers. So that's my input on that. Johanna, go ahead.
Yes, I agree with my counterparts here. I will just say probably the most important to me is no surprises. There's nothing worse than having an employee, including yourself, go in and all of a sudden there's a list of things that you didn't do. Well, if you don't know what you're supposed to do, if it's not put out in the forefront, then you're going to miss a few of them. So during that professional development phase, prior to start of school, we would take the job description and we would give a copy to every one of our coaches. We read through it together. Let's see, this is what we're changing. This is and the evaluation must parallel the job description, so that when you do your evaluation and you say that you expect certain things from them, then you have to make sure that it's on that evaluation and it's on the job description. One has to match the other. And I must say, so many HR directors I've worked with, one does not match the other. But the big thing is no surprises. If I'm out there working every day and I'm thinking I'm doing a good job, I get no feedback. And like Jim said, talk to them regularly, walk through, just have a conversation with them after practice. The fact of the matter is that if I don't know what you expect, then you can't expect me to do it. And so when we have it all laid out, then no surprises, then you're going to get a better product. You're going to have a better employee, a better coach, and a better athlete.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to any of those before we move on?
Heath, I just really want to quickly add to that. What we did, everybody's got an evaluation tool, and I heard some great comments today. But one of the things that we did, we have a little tool called the 5 measures of success. And we kind of rated the programs on 5 measures. One was, and I'm going to go through them quickly. One was, are your kids well disciplined? Are they getting in trouble? How are their grades? Your kids shouldn't be failing. How's your attendance? They better come to school. And the last one was, then you have to go 1 loss record. Unfortunately, that is a factor. But I think any tool you use, it just can't be won and loss. There's other factors that you can evaluate a program on that will help you justify whether it's good or bad.
Okay.
Keith, could I add one thing there?
You bet.
I know most of us here have been in multi-school districts, and I used to tell our guys, you can do a great job of coaching, but reality is in Northeast School District, one of you might be 6-0 against the others, and one of you might be 0-6. I mean, it's the way it's going to work out. It's unlikely that everybody's going to be 3-3. And that guy that's 0-6 may be doing a good job of coaching. His raw material may not be quite as good as the guy that was 6-0. So I wanted them to know that we were seriously looking at these tools that we call evaluation. And just because you're 0-6, we're not necessarily going to fire you. And just because you're 6-0 doesn't mean you're going to get corrected on some things also. So it's a competition, and it doesn't always balance out exactly even for everybody.
Good point. Marmion, looking back on your career, is there any area of your job that you would have done differently?
Ooh, yeah. No, I'll tell you, I have no regrets when it comes to the things that I did in my job when I was there. Probably, I would think that the one thing I would have done differently was learn how to chill out. Those of you who know me, if you ever saw me, I had a scowl on my face. I had my head down. It was because I was probably thinking about 800 things and 5 phone calls that had just come in. Because when you're dealing with the monster of HISD, like Andre's getting to deal with now, there's so many, between the politics involved in it, the parents, the administrators, the board members, all of these other little tentacles that come out of this school district, I would have chilled out a little bit more. I probably should have gotten on maybe some meds or something. I don't know. but if that was one thing I could have done differently, I wish I could have done that. I wish I could have exposed Andre to more things than what I did. I mean, I put him under my arm and wanted him to know everything before he set off to fly. But there were some things that he had to experience himself by sitting in that chair. And those of you who are ADs and have been ADs, you know that until you sit in that chair in that job, you don't know exactly what you would do. As an assistant, you say, oh, I would do this, I would do that, I would do this. But when you get in that chair and it is your responsibility, I'm sure there are things that all of us may do differently, but I have no regrets on what I did do while I was there. Do I wish I could have done more? Sure. And I think anyone that leaves that job or that position would feel like, you always know you could always do more, you could always do better, you could always improve. So, but I don't know really specifically, other than those few items, what I would have done differently. I did it the best way I knew how at the time. And times were different 2 years ago than what they are right now. So those who are in the job right now, I'm praying for you because this is a tough time. And none of us who are retired have ever seen times like this. And everyone is doing the very best that they can. I know you are. And just, keep your head up, keep your leadership up, and just, don't mess up. THSADA sure is a good place. But while you're in that position, it is tough, and no one understands it unless they have been there. And I would have probably been a little bit nicer and chilled out a little bit more if I could have done things differently, sir.
Bob?
Thank you, Keith. I really enjoyed being an athletic director. It was a lot of good times, a lot of great people, and built a lot of wonderful relationships that are life lasting. And so I don't have too many regrets. If I were to do something different, there's probably 2 things that I'd probably focus on. Jerry mentioned it earlier, it was work ethic, and I was kind of old school in the fact that I believed that I wouldn't ask my people to do anything that I wasn't willing to do. And so what that led to was I probably didn't delegate enough to people to allow them, more experiences and so forth. And I just wanted to make sure it was done right and that type of thing. So anyway, long story short, maybe I would delegate a few other things that I did not delegate. And then probably biggest regret I have would be I probably wasn't very tech savvy. And I obviously couldn't even sign on into today's meeting very well. That was a challenge.
We weren't going to bring that up.
However, those 2 things probably would be the biggest thing. And I know that as technology has become, the mainstay of what everyone's doing nowadays. You got virtual meetings, we have our Zoom meetings, we have different things. So I wish I'd been a little sharper in that area, or had the desire to challenge myself with that. And it may have helped. And I think that's the way kids communicate. That's the way coaches communicate. where I think that social media is probably our biggest downfall around us. I think that there are ways to use it to our advantage, and I probably should have done a better job with that.
All right, we got a couple of minutes left here, but I've got one more question I'm going to kind of throw out to open discussion. Anybody who wants to chime in on this, we can get a couple of responses. What advice would you give an athletic director who is nearing retirement and wonders when the right time would be? Anybody want to start
Well,
out?
you're gonna know. You'll know when you'll know. I mean, everybody always say, "Oh, you'll know when," but it was really strange because I mean, I love my job. My feet were happy every time they hit the floor in the morning to go to work, and I mean, I can honestly say that. But the last year that I worked, you know, I had knee surgery, I had shoulder surgery, broke my shoulder. And I kind of got to thinking, okay, now, but I kind of have a personal story in that my father retired on March 31st of '94 and passed away on June the 5th. So I thought, okay, you're 57 years old, Marmion. You got a life ahead of you, and you know you don't have to work from 6 in the morning to 11:30 and midnight every night, 6 days a week. You need to be able to have a little bit of life, you know, and in some school districts it may not be as demanding as a multi-school district because that was pretty demanding 6 nights a week, even with the assistants. I had great assistants, but you'll know you'll know when it's time to retire. But line your ducks up, and really when I became an AD, and one of the sponsors for THSADA is AXA, and I got in with a guy there. We just happened to run into each other, and I said, "Hey," he said, "Hey," and so I said, "I think I need to save some money," and so I mean, you know, and I had, you know, just make sure you got your ducks in a row. But you'll know when it's time, and don't go too early. And some folks are going to tell you, make sure you have something lined up so that when you do retire, that first month is great. I was in Key West the majority of the month, down in Fort Walton Beach, Panama City. But then after that month was over, okay, what are you going to do? And in the job that you do every day, you're so geared and you're so bustling. I mean, you're running 90 to nothing all the time, and if you're not, should be. But you're geared up so much that when you do retire and you do settle down, you need to be able to not only take that breath, but pick your head up and look around and say, you know what, there's other stuff going on, and I need to get involved in that. We think that our job is our life, or it becomes that way. A lot of the men in this job have very, very, very understanding wives because they're away from the house so much, and that might be a blessing for the wife. I don't know. Something, be ready to have all of your ducks in a row and know what you're going to do, and just when you get ready to pull the trigger, don't look back. Go. Woo.
Right. Hey, thanks, Marmion. You kind of spoke for all of us there. I know other people have some things that they'd like to say, but you know, we're short on time, and we just want to thank everybody for attending today's panel. And the video of this is going to be posted on our website in the next few days, so you can see this. We had a few people that sent some questions in, but we just didn't have time to get to those. So hopefully we'll have another opportunity to do this, and we'll put those questions up front when we can. To all of the panelists, please stay on so we can recap this event. And at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Joe to close out the webinar.
Hey, yes, thank you. Great job, Keith, moderating this. And I hope everybody watching got some I know you got some great insight from these retired athletic directors, and you may have a retired athletic director in your community that you can go and ask some of these same questions and get some insight. I think it was great. One thing I would mention, Pete Vela was due to join us this morning, but I had something come up and was unable to meet, to be with us. But we appreciate Pete for volunteering, and guys and gals, just a great job. And again, this will be posted, and Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for having us
Thanks,
on.
Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
Appreciate it.
Guys,
Thank
let
you,
me
Keith.
grab the sheet, Keith. I'm on it.